All we need to do is make sure we keep talking.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 38 of the Imperial Tides podcast. I'm your host, Holden, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Simone. And today we're going to be talking about a Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, which is a 1953 romantic musical starring none other than Marilyn Monroe and Jane Russell, two of the most attractive leading ladies in Hollywood history. And so, without much further ado, we always start these reviews off with a brief summary of what happens in the particular piece of media that we'll be reviewing. So, for the sake of this summary, I'm just going to call the two main characters by the names of their actresses because why not? You know, it'll be easier to keep track of things that way because when you're dealing with something like this with I don't know, just I guess icons, right? Like the legend and the reputation sort of supersede everything else. And so I don't know, just for to keep it as simple as possible, I'm just going to call them Marilyn Monroe and Jane Russell, right? So Marilyn Monroe and Jane Russell, they are a pair of American showgirls, right? Marilyn is a ditzy gold digger, and Jane is a sensible, sharp-tongued hedonist, and they are best friends. And the thing they have most in common is that they're both sort of, you know, they tend to use their charm, their feminine charm, to kind of manipulate the men around them playfully, lightheartedly. You know, this is not a this is not a brooding sort of movie, right? Sort of film. But so Marilyn is engaged to be married to a simpering pushover, so one of these sort of easy to manipulate men named Esmond, who has a rich father who disapproves of Marilyn because he thinks that she just wants to marry Edmund for his money. And by the looks of it, he's right. He's pretty much on the nose there. Marilyn, Jane, and Esmond are supposed to. They're going to go on a cruise ship together to France, where they're supposed to where Marilyn and Esmond are supposed to get married, and Jane is there as their chaperone. But Esmond's father keeps him from going at the last second, and so Marilyn and Jane have to take the journey by themselves without any male company. On the ship, so on the cruise ship, Jane, it doesn't take long for Jane to change the fact that she didn't have any male company before, and she surrounds herself with an all-male Olympic relay team, but can't actually do anything with them because they're too busy training because they've got to get ready for the Olympics. Meanwhile, Marilyn has met another kind of dumb guy, a bumbling old man named Piggy, who runs a diamond mining operation in South Africa, and is, of course, because of that, loaded. Marilyn uses her feminine charm, her feminine wiles, her womanly ways to try and get some diamonds from Piggy. And even though it is a bit like kind of on the line in terms of morality or whatever, it's like the implication in the film is that she's not having an affair on Esmond or anything. She's not cheating on him behind his back. She's just this is something that she does. She's kind of, she's a chronic gold digger, so she just kind of goes around and sees something that she likes and wants to take it, and she just she's an opportunist. She sees an opportunity and she goes in, and so she's just playing up whatever. She's just pulling this guy's strings in order to get what she wants from him, which is just jewelry, because that seems to be her big love in life. Really is diamonds more so than men or anything else. Her love, she has this crazy, intense love for diamonds and fine jewelry. So she's doing that with Piggy. She's just trying to get some of that shine from him. While Jane gets to know a mysterious man named Ernie Malone, who later turns out to be a private investigator hired by Esmond's dad to spy on Marilyn and prove that she isn't any good for Esmond, so that he can have basically proof, just hard evidence that the marriage would never work out, and it'll turn Esmond off from wanting to go through with it, as he does now. And so the investigator Malone ends up developing a genuine attraction for Jane. It's not just him being a spy and doing the opposite of the reverse of what the girls are doing. He's not like putting on his male charm or whatever for Jane. And even if he did, it probably wouldn't work on Jane because Jane seems to be a little more. She seems to be a bit of. She's the one that calls the shots in that sense, kind of. But get into it more a little later. Malone and Jane develop a mutual attraction for one another, but Malone complicates the situation by continuing to do his job regardless of this little hitch, and ends up snapping an incriminating photo of Marilyn and Piggy in their little cruise room together, their little, I guess, hotel room on the cruise ship, and Marilyn and Jane, from there, they have to conspire to get the photos back before Esmond can find out. And they do so by tricking Malone into taking off his clothes in front of them while they're all in their hotel room together, kind of just getting drunk. And it's a long story, but yeah, lots of lighthearted hijinks ensue throughout the course of the narrative that I wouldn't be able to do any justice by simply relaying to you here. But long story short, Piggy gives Marilyn his wife's diamond tiara. It's this family heirloom. It's this whole thing. And Marilyn gets in trouble for being in possession of it, because Piggy lies to the authorities, lies to his wife, obviously, to get away scot-free, and he basically pins the blame all on Marilyn. And so she's left to shoulder the brunt of the responsibility for it. And the film ends with Jane dressing up like Marilyn, impersonating her, and attending a court trial in France, in which both she and Malone are able to work together to get Piggy to return his wife's tiara to her and exonerate Marilyn. And Marilyn marries Esmond, and Jane marries Malone. So the whole thing ends in a very quick wedding scene. And yeah, I mean, because it's a musical, there are songs along the way, but we'll talk about the songs in specific in a moment. But is there anything I missed, Simone? Is there anything you'd like to add to my little summary of the film before we move on to the main discussion portion of the podcast here?
None.
Okay, well, so then let me ask you right out the starting gate, Simone. What would you rate this film out of 10, and why?
What would I rate this film and why? I think I'll my initial I'm having some difficulties with connection.
It's okay. We can just cut it out. We can just cut it out later.
Is it okay? I think my initial rating for this one is an 8. I think a solid 8. It is entertaining. I think I see this one as an introduction to the era where it was set in. This certain culture that I'm envisioning when I saw some Marilyn Monroe posters or pictures, arts, because I never seen any moving pictures of her. So that's how I.
Okay. And well, based on what you know about Marilyn Monroe, do you think this film was a good introduction to her work proper?
I think it is. It is a good introduction, especially. I think it exceeds more my expectation of who she acts or why Marilyn Monroe is really iconic. This is that in my impression.
Okay. Do you think the film stands on its own without the star power that it does have? Can you separate the icons, like obviously Marilyn Monroe, and to a slightly lesser extent Jane Russell? Can you separate that from the film and look at the film itself, I guess, a little more objectively and see that it is a good film, or is it a good film, or is it a bad film on its own? How do you feel about just the film itself in general, just if you had to isolate it from the star power that's behind it, or in it, or wherever?
Okay. That's okay. I think that's supposed to be what I need to do. But yeah, I think if I were to look at this as some this is the form of romantic comedy movies that are said in the past that this is how it works back then. Now, like, to compare it with things here, or what are the improvements in the uh, multimedia or action of some sort. It, I need to look at it more actively. So maybe it's a 7 in that sense. If I have to remove my impression from the icon itself, because I think that it is getting in a way, because it's, I know, Shikapna um, has this emits this it's kind of attracting in a way, so that's I kind of buy into it.
Well, no, I mean, you don't necessarily have to separate them. I asked it because I thought it'd be an interesting question for the discussion, but you don't have to, there's nothing wrong with approaching it one way or the other. It's just everyone, appreciates things differently. But it is a good question to ask, I think, because most people would probably go into it and just kind of get caught up in the glitz and the glamour, because it is a very glitzy, very glamorous kind of film, and it helps. It certainly helps that it has the massive amounts of star power that went into it. But it is interesting to try to isolate just the basic film, components, the elements on their own, and see if they still hold up when you remove when you remove Monroe and Russell from the equation. I would say, before I get into my answer, which is very detailed, and I'll explain why in a second, but before I get into that whole, gushing spiel ramble thing, I guess I'd like to say that just right off the bat, the movie, it's very standard. It's interesting. It's there's a lot going on with it, but I would say a lot of it is very run of the mill. It's a very standard to by the numbers romantic comedy musical, and it's very much of its time. It's very 1950s, and and the two, it's hard to imagine what the movie would be like without the two of them, but I imagine it wouldn't be very good, because when you take away the star power, you aren't left with much else. It's a complicated question to ask, because really it's hard to separate the legend. It really, I can't really imagine what it would be without them. So maybe I'm being blinded by the star power as well, but regardless if that's a good thing or not, I don't know. It's just, yeah. But so for my answer, so for what I would rate it and everything, there's a lot to say about this movie, and I hope I'll be able to give it its proper due when trying to break it down, trying to articulate my thoughts about it. So for the purpose of doing that, I'm going to structure my contributions to this discussion a little differently this episode. I'm basically just going to say everything that I have to say about the film within my response to this very first question, and then harken back to the points I've made for the remainder of the questions. So this is basically just me. I'm gonna read a massive kind of essay that I wrote, kind of, it's not really, but I'm just gonna read my response here, and then after I've gone through what I have here in my script, then we can start talking. We can have like a more organic discussion where we just kind of bounce back and forth for the remainder of the runtime of the podcast here. But yeah, that being said, here it is. So for me, I would say that the film is a 9 out of 10, actually. I gave it one more star than you did. I really like this film, and it's because, yeah, I don't know. I really like this film, even though it made me mildly uncomfortable all throughout. There's something about musicals and theater that mildly unnerves me, I would say. And it might just be the fact that and it might just be, the case that the fact that, everything they stand for is the exact opposite of everything that I do. At least stylistically, because whereas I prefer media like the show Mad Men, for example, or the various films of someone like Ingmar Bergman, which are dark and heavy and moody and full of all this existential dread and longing and all that sort of thing. Something like this, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, completely contradicts all of that. You know what I mean? It contradicts all of it, and yet. But it contradicts all of it, and yet still manages to arrive at a similar destination in the end. Right, because beneath all of the glitz and glamour and lighthearted sugary charm, I would say that this movie has a lot to say about the relationships between men and women, and the state of I guess women's rights and women's place in society, and the freedom of expression that they have, and so forth during the time in which the movie was made. And it's the kind of social commentary that you'd expect to see a little later in American and world history, like somewhere in the mid to late 1960s, not the early to mid 50s. But I have to say, it's respectable that the people who made this got on the ball early, in the midst of the early 1950s, which people tend to view today, looking back, as a decade of sexual repression, social conservatism. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is regardless. But government intrusion into the personal affairs of individual citizens, and the mass paranoia and propaganda that was brought about by both the traumas of World War II and increasing Cold War tensions between the U.S. and Russia. The movie's clever. They literally sugarcoat their message by wrapping it in attractive packaging. Putting a pretty little bow on it, and by presenting it as an innocuous, by-the-numbers romantic comedy musical typical of its time. They're able to get away with trashing contemporary social norms and mores while winning everybody over at the same exact time by using such a medium. It really is. It's like a Trojan horse. It presents itself as one thing, but on the inside, it's a completely different thing altogether, entirely. And in doing so, it is both. Just because the exterior and the interior clash with one another, I mean, they're still both parts, two sides of the same coin, two parts of the same entity. Yeah, and it's interesting. So let's break it down a little. Let's say. So, for example, most of the male characters in this film, they are depicted as amoral hedonists and bumbling idiots who give in to our leading ladies' charms without much forethought or hesitation. It doesn't take much to they don't need to be pushed very far in order to cave in to what Marilyn and Jane want from them, ask of them, demand of them. And the leading ladies themselves, Marilyn and Jane, are like two Aphrodites on Earth. I like the two Aphrodites on Earth, surrounded by all of these mortal men, mere mortal men. I like the simplicity of their friendship. There's a good dynamic going on between them. Of course, the blonde is the ditzy, gold-digging one, and the brunette is the sharp, confident one who knows what she wants and how to get it, and doesn't really care what others think about it. And the film's tone and I would say that the film's tone is its most effective quality. A message like the one it's presenting could be difficult for a lot of people to swallow because it goes against the grain of the times. But what makes it palatable, what makes it accessible, is the aforementioned Trojan horse of a form in which it's delivered. And to compound that, it helps that the musical aspect of the film itself is solid on its own, right? The sequence during which Marilyn performs Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, for example, has been cited as one of the most iconic musical film scenes of all time. And I think it still holds up today. I think it still holds up today. None of its impact is diluted in 68, almost 70 years. And the funny thing about the movie is that it really just depicts women as men, in a sense, when it comes down to it. I think this is best demonstrated by the sequence in which Jane Russell performs the song Ain't There Anyone Here for Love, in which Jane is surrounded by a bunch of idealized male figures. And, at the risk of sounding really fucking gay when I say this, it's my favorite scene in the entire film. And the reason why it's my favorite scene in the entire film, I will get into that. Trust me, I will get into it. But in the film, in this particular scene, the men are they are shown off to the women, the background male characters here, the dancers, the supporting cast, whatever you would call them. They're shown off to the audience much in the same way that women tend to be shown off to audiences. They are there to do little more. The men in this case, they are here to do little more than provide aesthetic and sexual appeal, right? And so in this sense, the roles have been reversed. The tables have been turned. And so instead of a woman in just a towel, getting out of the shower, wrapping herself around in a white towel, one on her head to cover her hair and one to cover her chest, or instead of a woman bending over to pick something up like a poster girl or something, a pinup girl rather. This is sexualization moving in the opposite direction. Against the grain, against the standard, against the norm, right? And Jane Russell, her character is in the middle of it all. She's the curator of this little exhibition, and she's basking in the glory of her, the achievement that she's made, in her power over them all, and the power, that she possesses over all of these men. She's got quite the domineering nature here in her role as matriarch, and the wink and nod attitude that she adopts alongside it provides the perfect little cherry on top. It's an excellent juxtaposition of elements, and this and every other song in the film makes for great fun to go back and listen to repeatedly. Yeah, each musical sequence in the film, I would say, creates an isolated, well-constructed moment of joy and bliss, and both to listen to and watch. So it's not only it's a visual experience as well as an audio experience, or a sonic experience. And I've got to say that this music's I got to say the music makes the movie pretty fantastic, and the movie as a whole is pretty fantastic in general. The choreography for each of these sequences, these musical sequences, is excellent. It's always excellent. I don't think there's one song that I didn't like, either the scene of or the actual just the song itself. And the world that the movie creates, when you add all of this up, when you put it all together, the world that it creates through the flat, the technical side of things, I guess the flatness of its set pieces and the almost neon brightness of its costumes. It's just incredible. It's like a Technicolor daydream with just a hint of the unpleasantness of the reality on the other side of the film screen, right? As if or the other side of the cameras, as if the filmmakers are saying, wouldn't it be nice if everything was like this all the time? It's in that sense, it's a bit sad. It's like, you show people what life could be like, and then you take it away from them because it simply isn't. There's a certain poignancy in that, in what's not said. In the space between lines, in the silence between scenes, let's say. So moving forward from that, the sexual undertones. Let's talk about those now. The sexual undertones throughout the film, in general, are, I would say that they're pretty insane for a movie from the 1950s, especially a Hollywood movie from the 1950s. It's not some independent joint or anything. I don't know much about the history of independent cinema, but if there were independent films back then, I'm sure there were at least some, right? You would be more apt to find this sort of content or this sort of material from one of those, as opposed to some officially some Hollywood approved work. But yet here we are, right? The two main characters, Jane and Marilyn, but especially Marilyn, are pretty much doing everything with the male characters on screen except engage in full-on intercourse with them. I can't emphasize this. I cannot emphasize this enough. Marilyn practically, Marilyn has sex with every man that she encounters in this movie through her words and implications alone. It's really, and I don't tend to use this term lightly. It's actually quite amazing to watch, just to see play out. I don't want to say that the movie is feminist, even though it is. It definitely is. There's no denying that it is pro-women and all that sort of thing. But I think a more fitting term would be egalitarian. I think egalitarian captures more of what, it just captures more, I guess. It captures the real texture of what they're going for here. The film places emphasis on the differences between male and female nature, right? And not all of the male characters are morons. There are children and cab drivers and workers who can appreciate the feminine spirit and the charm of Marilyn and Jane and their beauty without either trying to take advantage of it or throwing themselves at its feet or being victim to it or any of that sort of thing. Marilyn and Jane Marilyn and Jane are also clearly anti-heroic in temperament as well. But the film makes you like them. It makes you look at what they're doing and say, fair play, fair play. It's like when you use your phone on a test in high school and tell the teacher you're just using your resources or something along similar lines. The moral nature of such an action is dubious and confused at best. But that's of course what makes it interesting. That's what makes it worth contemplating, devoting at least a certain portion of your time and attention to. Exploring all the various possibilities that life has to offer, in a nutshell. And that's what Jane and Marilyn are doing here. Just using what they have and taking what they're offered. There's an interesting moral code at work here. A lot of what they're doing is it's transactional, and whether it's good or bad or whatever, it's personal. It's between individuals. It's not really, it's not something that the government can necessarily regulate or so forth. It's very ambiguous in that sense, and it's something that's worth taking a closer look at, I would say, holding a magnifying glass over. Yeah, so like I said, there's an interesting moral code at work here, and the characters themselves. They have their own individual moral codes and ethics, I guess, as well. For example, what Jane cares most about is protecting her best friend Marilyn. I mean, her loyalty always falls. That's her number one priority is making sure that Marilyn is doing all right for herself. Because, admittedly, Marilyn, both in real life and in this film, were kind of the type of person that probably could do with a little looking after by someone like Jane, someone sensible and kind of in the know and all that sort of thing. So that's how Jane is like. Whereas Marilyn is this paradoxical figure who's both simple and high maintenance in that what she wants from the world is very narrow in scope, but also very high in cost. Right? All she needs in life are diamonds, really. She said with equal parts honesty and irony. But what makes Marilyn's character interesting primarily is just how untouchable she is. Nothing can get to her. You can't fault her for apparent, you can't fault her for her apparent stupidity because, of course, it's it's that apparent stupidity that proves to be the key to her success, and she's shrewd about it. She's cunning. It's an act she has a lot of passion and investment for, but it's an act nonetheless, and it works. So why would she do anything else? You know what I mean? Also, and also, although I prefer Jane over Marilyn in this, and in terms of I guess general persuasion and interest or whatever, I can understand better why Marilyn has the appeal that she does from having watched this film. In real life, she wasn't all that far off from how she is here in the film, how she depicts herself here in this character, with this character. And so it's like talk about playing to one's strengths, right? She embraces the role because she embodies it real life when she's offset as well as on set. And her acting in this it's nothing to her. I mean, it's light work. It really is like the equivalent of an Olympic class athlete being paid to do 15 push-ups or something, But finally, I think what I like about the movie the most is how it's stylistically the exact opposite of something like Berlin Alexanderplatz, which we've just come off of watching. I mean, the reason why we're watching this is because we kind of need to do a complete 180 from that. But yeah, I mean, it's stylistically it's on the exact opposite end of the stylistic spectrum, let's just say. And yet, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes is still able to fulfill a very similar function as far as its underlying philosophical thesis goes to something like Berlin Alexanderplatz. The original musical on which this film is based on which this film was based was itself actually an adaptation of a 1925 novel by writer Anita Luce, and literary critics have put the novel on par with works like The Great Gatsby for its depiction of the 1920s as a time of cultural and social decadence, right? And funnily enough, the thing that inspired Anita to write it was the fact that she felt as though men didn't give her as much romantic attention as she maybe perhaps thought she deserved, or maybe just objectively did deserve, because she was a brunette and not a blonde. It was literally because of her hair color, she said. For example, there's this time where she was having a hard time putting her luggage into the overhead compartment on a train that she was on once during a trip. And none of the men around her were helping her because, and they weren't paying any attention to her at all whatsoever, because they were all distracted by a beautiful blonde sitting across the aisle from her. So that's what she said anyway. And it's interesting because writers like F. Scott Fitzgerald, Sherwood Anderson, Edith Wharton, James Joyce, Aldous Huxley, H.G. Wells, H.L. Mencken, and William Faulkner all praised Anita for the book. Some of them even wrote her letters. Some of them took her out to dinner just to celebrate just how good the novel actually was. So it's really interesting there. I didn't expect that when I watched this. I didn't know any of this before I chose this movie. So it's weird that it has this massive backstory. That there's so much rich literary history that goes into it, behind it. That's probably why I like it, it gets even weirder too, because then there are also communists in the Soviet countries who thought that the book was some sort of anti-capitalist polemical in which all of the female characters are poor victims of the American economic system. Even though but of course Anita Noose claimed that it was not that. She stated that it was not. That was not her intention when she wrote it. It was more about gender relations, the battle of the sexes, so to speak. And the book was also translated into over a dozen languages, and it has been published in 85 editions. Okay, so just think about that for a second. 85 times this book has been published over and over again. The same book, 85 times. That's insane. And what's funny about what's funny about the 1953 film version, the film adaptation, is that it actually had to conform to the standards of the Motion Picture Production Code, which is basically it's like the code of ethics that they had, kind of prudishness stuff, like that you have pre-code movies that didn't have to follow I think it was also called the Hays Code, right? Or maybe this is a different code. I'm not overly. This is not my area of expertise. I should have done a little more research into it, but I don't think the specifics matter so much as the core truth. The truth at their core, or whatever, right? So let's just roll with it. But basically, this code it made it so that you couldn't show nudity. You couldn't be too sexually explicit. You basically couldn't do like all the things that you could do in a novel. You couldn't do them on film, and so it kind of limited the medium. It kind of stifled it. People couldn't, filmmakers couldn't express themselves to the best of their ability. Their freedom to expression, freedom of expression. Essentially their First Amendment rights were being kind of hampered upon a little bit, and whether that's good or bad or not, I mean, it happened a long time ago, but regardless, I mean, that was the situation. And so that was actually also part of the reason why it wasn't set in the 1920s as the original novel was, because the filmmakers didn't want, not the filmmakers, sorry, but the people who made the Motion Picture Production Code, they didn't want filmmakers to depict a historically accurate Roaring 20s, because there was a lot of, again, sexual liberation and just things that wouldn't have gone well with things that didn't really go too well with the typical portrait of just a nuclear family values and all that sort of thing. Just it wasn't as wholesome as it could have, as it should have been, or whatever. And I guess they didn't have ratings back then properly, so everyone was expected to watch a movie. Movies were designed to be where anyone could watch them. Kind of, you could take the family, you could go by yourself, you could watch it with your partner, so on and so forth. All types could watch it, all walks of life. You didn't really separate as much then, but in any event, in spite of the fact that and yet, in spite of the fact that the movie actually had to conform to the Motion Picture Production Code, and maybe even because of that, maybe because it did have to, at least in some parts, I think the movie is still it's a genuine masterpiece. It's not a massive masterpiece. You can have a small masterpiece, but I think that's what it is. I think it's a subtle, underhanded kind of work of genius, to be honest. And I think whatever greatness from the original novel, I think that does carry over, at least in spirit. I think it carries over into the film. And I especially and so going off what I said about this balance that the film has to do, this tension between having to conform, having to adhere to this moral cinematic code, and remaining faithful to while also remaining faithful to the original spirit of the novel. I especially like how bipolar some of the compromises they made between that novel's original vision and the film's code of ethics. The film code of ethics is. And, for example, I think it's great how such an incredibly feminist, or at least pro-woman movie can still end with a depiction of marriage as the social and existential apotheosis for a woman. At least you could interpret it as such, right? And so in a sense, this movie embodies it really embodies the transition between the pre and post 1960s cultures and societies of the previous century, or essentially the transition between the first half and the second half of the 20th century overall, right? If we're going to look at it from a broader lens, and so I think even more so than that, I think this is also easily the best musical I think I've ever had to sit through. So yeah, there's that as well. It's a great musical. It's a great farce as well. And all in all, it makes for a really fun time, a really enjoyable viewing experience. And now that I've seen it, I really doubt that any other Marilyn Monroe movie could top it. The bar has been set way too high for that. Even if the others are fantastic, I mean, I think this is sort of in a class of its own. There's something very clever about it that I can't really get over. I thoroughly enjoy it. Also, and then also it's a shame that Jane Russell and Marilyn Monroe. It's a shame that they didn't stick together more closely throughout the years. Jane was, but behind the scenes, Jane was a deeply religious Republican, whereas Marilyn was a sexually liberated reader of existential literature. And I think opposites in real life. They were opposites in real life as they were on screen. And although, of course, the problem is, you can't write a script to force people like that to stick together in reality, but you can for, however long it takes to make a 60-minute or so film. And it's a shame because I think they did make a pretty good team. And I could honestly, in a way, I see this movie as like, you could have taken a concept like this and just kind of run with it. This could have been the first part of a long-running series of just very, by-the-numbers movies like this that, maybe the rest wouldn't have been good, but at least this one was a strong start to it, right? But this could have been, or it could have made for like a really, the premise of this highly successful television series, This could have been a whole thing. And in fact, I mean, the novel itself was based off of a series of short stories about these two characters in a slightly embryonic form. They were the prototypes, but still, I mean, nonetheless, like it seems like this would be a very sustainable kind of model. You could just kind of pump out something like this over and over again, and it probably wouldn't lose like all of its charm anyway. I don't know, it might dilute over time, but like, I don't know. It's weird to me that this is the only one. I mean, but the movie does have a sequel, but it's not really a sequel, and we'll get into that a little later. But the sequel is not. It doesn't have the same characters, and Marilyn Monroe isn't in it. So, well, anyway, in any case, I think I've gushed for long enough here. I mean, we're going for over half an hour now, but I think the point that I want to make, really, the core point, the point at heart here is that I liked the film, that I liked the movie, and I'm glad it wasn't as cringeworthy and discomforting as I thought it would be when I went into it initially. Instead, it was actually the exact opposite, and now I'm actually I'm half depressed that I now have to live in the knowledge that I wouldn't have been able to come up with something as fun and lighthearted and rich as this, even if I tried, even if I sold my soul to the devil. But I've got to say, I'm pleasantly surprised with Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and it's good stuff. But just as a footnote to all of this, objectively speaking, I would say that Jane and Malone's relationship is a bit rushed and unnecessary. The character of Esmond is a total cuck, and even though he's supposed to be within the context of the film, I still think he's annoying, and I wish they would have portrayed him a bit differently. Although how, I couldn't really tell you. I don't know what it is I don't like about it. Maybe it's just the fact that like him and all of the male characters in this entire movie. I mean, they're just they're not like they don't look like movie stars, Whereas Jane Russell and Marilyn Monroe, they're like the movie stars. They are the actresses. It's like you don't have any male character that you can point to in this film and go, that's the actor. It's like it's not equal at all. It's really kind of jarring to see such attractive women surrounded by such like kind of hideous men. It's kind of, I don't know, maybe it's the sharpness of that contrast that's irritating, but yeah. And so going from there, I mean, the reason I didn't give it a 10 is not because of these little nitpicks that I have with the film from a narrative perspective, but it's because it's rather because I feel like it could have been even better had they not forced the filmmakers to adhere so strictly to their stupid ethics code, But at the same time, there's a chance that if the filmmakers were given free reign, they might have perhaps pushed their pushed some personal agendas too far. Not necessarily the agendas of the original work, but just their own personal agendas, because you kind of see that a lot these days. The opposite problem is true now. It's not that the filmmakers are being censored; it's that they're being allowed to get away with too much, I guess, and they're not held to a high enough standard anymore. So it can be bad both ways. The balance is, you want to go for the center. You really almost always want to go for the center, unless it makes you completely ineffectual, unless you're the kind of neutral party that like is completely neutralized. But anyway, yeah, it might have turned out to be crap if they had been given too much free reign. But so I think the best way they could have done it was by faithfully adapting the original 1925 novel by Anita Luce. That's how I would have done it anyway if I were in charge. But there's my rant done and over with. I think I made my points. Is there anything you'd like to add to any of that, Simone?
I think I would take it. I mean, it gave me enough time to think about the movie or to articulate. I just came up before or I just came up from an afternoon nap, and I think I'm not full state to do a review, but now I think I'm back to what particular state I should be in. Yeah, yeah. I think there are a lot of things that I can appreciate from this movie. This is how I slightly envisioned what kind of character Marilyn Monroe can portray, and especially the era where it was set in. It's always been interesting how the customs of people back then. I didn't have that much knowledge. We don't even talk about these things in school or in any forms of media. If something's if they will translate movies from the latter era, it might spoil something or remove its rawness, the particular minute that they put into it. That that's pretty much how I don't like some translated work that they did in the televisions here. But anyway, getting back into the topic, it's really good. I think that I can. There are some different things that we can relate to things that are happening now. It's just getting back to the previous that we covered. We've always been talking about the history ring itself. I think it's pretty much this throughout these different forms of entertainment or media. They filled it uh, with those elements, with this what do you call this? The tiny basis of informations that makes it interesting. It just um, not only focus on what's happening in the particular of the present time that it was set in, but it kind of what do you call this? It gives it a value that would make it last for an eternity or for some sort of time that it could as interesting as how we look into it.
Yeah, yeah. Um, what do you have to say about the film's technical merits?
Okay, well, I don't know where to begin, but um, from not so good piece um of the media that we consumed the last time, Berlin and Express. Even though it's not very good, a lot of flaws that we discover or we get in the discussion last time. Even though there are a lot of things like that didn't work that well, but I can see the potential of it. Me, I think the best thing that I would get from it is to look at things differently. The focus on um, what's setting and how it relates to the how things kind of fit together or some sort of form of harmony in it because make it a good work. And this is where that is what this show does today. It just I don't know. It's cool. It's like it's ending in all aspects, but the purely entertainment. You can get something from it. There are different setup um, that they put together. They incorporated that you can touch. For example, Marilyn, she defined herself. And just like said, you put it, a man can't. She do it in a way that mostly on her talks. I don't know how would I give justice into it, but it's really interesting how it played out together. How what do you call? She created a different language for such thing. What I don't know with feminism or the the social interaction between men and women. This one. You just see like how it's depicted in this one. It's really interesting how works. I don't know if it still works now, but yeah, it's cool. I haven't seen this kind of movie.
Yeah, it's good. Hey, by the way, I hear a lot of rustling on your side. It sounds like you're like waving like a paper fan or something. I don't know. The audio's picking it up, so I don't know. Maybe if you could reduce that a little bit, if you can, it's fine. But yeah, I just noticed that. But you're right. I mean, she does. She has a very interesting worldview. Not only her character, but Marilyn herself, and that does you definitely see that carry through the screen in this film in particular. What I would say about the film's technical merits, again, I kind of, I structured this one a little differently because I just kind of, the only reason I did that is because it's really arbitrary. I just wrote it that way. So when I went to write the script, I just kind of wrote everything out. I could have separated it and broken it up into particular questions, but I kind of wanted to just capture like I don't know, the mood in which I had originally written it, I guess. But yeah, because the film is a 1950s musical. The set design and costuming is pretty standard for the times, I would say, and despite not being the most technically impressive thing in the world, it does hold a certain charm to it that more polished aesthetics actually lack because they're a little too clean, they're a little too round around the, they're a little too soft around the edges. They're kind of they're too corporatized, I guess, for lack of a better term. Although that might be the best term for it. The production value in this film is it's expensive enough to reach like actual film quality, cinematic quality, but I would say the actual design, the actual visual direction and aesthetic direction with which they decided to go is more closely related to the kinds of things that you would see in a stage play, for example. And so in that sense, it makes for a good marriage of mediums. So yeah, is there anything you'd like to add to that, Simone?
Yeah, sorry about the background. It's my microphone because it's moving along the way I start moving.
Okay, no worries.
Okay. I don't know, I forgot what to say.
We were talking about I guess the film's aesthetic style. Like, what did you think of the look of the film? A lot of bright colors and a lot of interesting outfits from Jane and Marilyn. The pink dress that Marilyn's wearing and the when she's singing "Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend." I mean, that scene's been recreated a dozen times over by a lot of different people. And just talk to me about the visual style. How the film looks and if that contributes anything to the overall experience of watching it, and if you got anything out of looking at the pretty little colors and all that sort of thing.
I don't know off of the topic if I would define it as still sort of conservative. I don't know. It's I just picture maybe it gives me a different view on it on what conservative is or being conservative is, but I can say that it's not much. I mean, there are parts that are too revealing if during the time that it to describe how they are clothed in this one. I still say that it's conservative, that it's I don't know how to put this part into English. What do you call this? Because they set out some rules in it that can you can cross, or they just settled it that they convince you that this is this what it is, so that's pretty much it. Or I don't know how to put this into words really, but yeah. Back into the aesthetic aspect, it's interesting. I mean, how it's not, I guess, too much because it's just it was revealed that she's a digger and she's upon the shiny stuff, diamonds and jewels and whatnots, and it's not too much. It's not too much in the screen that those elements are always present, but it doesn't overpower the scene too much shining stuff and whatnot. I think that's what I noticed when it comes to this.
Yeah. And by the way, when we say by the way, for the audience, when we're saying conservative, we're small c. We're not talking about politics here. Conservative is in maybe just a dollop of mustard is enough, not a whole line or a row or whatever. That sort of thing. But yeah. It's actually interesting because I didn't think about this. Us talking about it reminded me of it though. It's weird. It's like the costumes. Let's talk about the costumes in specific. It's like, well, just that aspect of it in particular. It's really it's like there's a clashing going on, between polite society, like the small c conservatism that's present in the film, like you said, and then the more garish, more I guess flamboyant kind of theatery, kind of theatrical, um, the burlesque and the like I guess the best example would be again well, the best example of this would be when Jane Russell performs Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, when she's in the courtroom and she's dressed up as Marilyn and she has she's trying to get Marilyn off the cops off Marilyn's back, and so she takes off, she has her fur coat on and then she just takes it off and she's got like a showgirl outfit underneath and she breaks out into a number and song, and that it really contributes to the film in a very big way. It's things like that, and also I get the part again the Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend sequence where all these women are they're doing like weird acrobatics and they're hanging from the ceiling, they're suspended from the ceiling, and it's like they're all adding up to make like a human chandelier. It's like a lot of weird stuff like that. It makes the movie a lot like a fantasy land. I said it was a daydream earlier, but it's like a parallel universe. It's an alternate reality. It's a very mild one. It's a very nice one, where where things like this can happen, where people can just break out into like a whole song and dance perfectly choreographed like dance, singing and dancing routine in the middle of a court case. It's like in the middle of a court trial. It's that's the kind of world that we're in. It can happen at any moment. And and then whenever people sing, it's like everyone else crowds around to listen. Everything bends to kind of to gravitate towards it. They suck them into their orbit. This is something that you see a lot in it's standard for musicals, but I thought that the way that they implemented it within this particular film and how they, I guess, blended it with the narrative, I thought it was very smooth. It was impressive. Not all musicals can do a good job of balancing that. Like, even in great musicals, like I would say like White Christmas or something. I don't need, that's not even really a real example, but let's just say some other imaginary hypothetical musical where it's like sometimes it's like the songs are, I don't know too much about musicals, but it's like sometimes the songs are good on their own and sometimes the movie itself is good on its own, but when you put them together they just don't mix well. They're not implemented as smoothly as they are in something like this. It's like they're just not, that transition, I don't know, it's just not, they don't mesh as well as they should for whatever reason. Maybe the transitions are too jarring or whatever the case may be. There's no unity. There's not as much unity as there is here. Very cohesive work. I like that. I respect that. I like it when things are nice and ordered in that sense. A little bit. I'm not like too crazy about it, but it's good when when it can pull it off. It's impressive and it deserves credit. So that's the credit I'll give it. But anyway, Simone. I guess to move the discussion forward a little further, because we are kind of we have been talking for a while now. And I don't feel like we've really gotten into much yet, really. What did you think of the soundtrack? This is a musical, so what did you think of the musical aspect of the musical?
Yeah, that's a good. It is really what draws me into it. The musical aspect of it. This is a musical, so they included it. What makes everything is interesting. Design is runs pretty smoothly, and also the two girls, the main character of this, it makes it interesting. But what makes things, I think, what makes glue it together or of some sort that put these things in together is the musicals. It's really good. I don't know if this is related to this, but I kind of remember some Disney musicals because growing up, I don't know, we have some sort of DVDs or some sort of magic English type, some budget films to learn some sort of, and there are some included Disney musicals from maybe the first years of first 20 years of Disney. Because I'm not sure, but it's really pretty kind of date back from the same or of some sort. I kind of just remember things which relate to this video. Yeah, that's why I appreciate it. I just I haven't been thinking about it for years, and I just kind of heard it in connection to this one, which is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And how would you say that that the experience of watching those connects to the experience of watching this? If you could still remember what the experience of watching those was like.
Of course, I'm amazed. I'm amazed because it's some sort of I consider this an introduction of some good or something um better to come. So I'm sorry, it's just maybe commemorates latter era to come because it's been I guess I'm pretty in the middle of childhood when I got introduced into that some films or media before. So and now it's I'm transitioning into pretty much sort of thing. So I guess I can see the connection in it, which is really interesting.
Nice, nice. Hey, if you can, by the way, I don't want to interrupt too much, but I've noticed that I think your microphone the audio for it is cutting out. So if you can get rid of the microphone altogether, that might actually help. But if you can't, that's fine. But that's something that I noticed while I was listening. But I guess how I feel about the soundtrack personally, I would say that the choreography for each song, again, I said this earlier, I think it's very good. I think it's very well done, well executed. But the songs themselves, I don't know. There's something about them that it's slightly lacking, I would say. Although in what ways in particular, I couldn't tell you. Maybe they needed a little more energy behind them, or maybe they would have made more sense had the film been set in the era in which they were actually written. If it was more true to the original source material, if they had been able to do that. Perhaps some of the lyrics and chords and so forth were changed to suit this particular adaptation, or to cut for time, or whatever the case may have been. It's like there's something about it. It just doesn't. It seems somewhat castrated. I don't know, somewhat diluted. But whatever the case may be, I would still say that the scenes in which the songs are performed are great. But I think without the dance choreography and without the vibrant costuming and interesting set pieces and all of that, all of the stuff put over it, the songs have a hard time standing on their own. Standing by themselves, at least relatively speaking. And so when I say this, it's just what it comes down to is the fact that there are just more iconic soundtracks out there. Something like White Christmas with Bing Crosby is a good example. White Christmas delivers excellent performances of the songs within the film, while also managing to put together a solid soundtrack that can to be enjoyed outside of it as well. You can just put it on in the you can just get the CD and put it in your car as you're driving along, if or some other such example. And then also watch the movie and have two distinct but equally powerful experiences, equally effective, equally enjoyable, pleasant experiences, right? But yeah, so to the film's credit, I would say that if its soundtrack were just, but I guess to the film's credit, and this is just a purely practical matter, if its soundtrack were even just slightly better, I'm sure the people who own the rights to it wouldn't have allowed anyone to get away with uploading it onto YouTube for free. So maybe in a way it's a good thing the songs aren't more iconic, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to watch it as we did. But yeah, I don't know. Is there anything you'd like to add to any of that, Simone?
I don't. Maybe not.
What did you think of the characters themselves? Not just Jane and Marilyn, but everybody else, I guess, as well. Everyone's included in that. But what do you think of the cast of characters here?
I think that's a good point. Uh, I think the most aside to main character, I think I was or not exactly drawn, but I think I like sort of the kid. It's I kind of remember or some connections to Home Alone or McCulkin. I don't know what's his name, but
Yeah,
what's exactly his name. But that kid from A Christmas. I kind of saw it, but I think they just maybe if they would incorporate one more with that kid, it would be really interesting for for him to have more screen time. But I think maybe it's just balance, because if he has much interaction in the scene or much screen time, it would be um, change the movie. It might shape the way in a way that how how goofy, or is it goofy? I don't know. Um, how Malone is, or because these are the similar themes that I can see.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, Macaulay Culkin from Home Alone. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, I think, and also if I were to look at the other characters, it just I don't think that I think that it is um good to say that they are really supporting characters. They can really stand on their own or make sense of the movie um just by them, or without the help of the main characters. Um, they won't make sense if they won't blend it with the main characters, or with this the interactions that they have with how it goes, how the whole movie works.
yeah, yeah. Pretty much everyone but Marilyn and Jane are like stock characters, type characters. You know, it's like you've got the dumb, you've got the idiot. I mean, they're all props basically. I mean, that's the thing that's really interesting about the movie is that it's a huge reversal of all of that. You know, it's like now the women, you know, and the women really they don't do anything particularly bad. You know, it's like they just act like two guys, two single, you know, bachelors and in their early to mid 20s, you know, going to bars and just picking up women. You know, it's like they're pretty much just doing that but reversed, you know. And it's interesting that there is this, that it does feel weird when you see it. You know, it's not as it just goes to show, you know, it's like things aren't as egalitarian as they perhaps could be if that's an ideal to strive for. But you know that whole discussion is for another time, I suppose. But yeah, and so for context, but to everyone, by the way, in case you didn't actually watch the movie or you don't remember or whatever the case may be, the kid we were talking about earlier is there's this part in the movie. It was one of the hijinks that I didn't want to really outline because I didn't want to detail because it just take too long or whatever. Just no point really doing it. You know, up until now, of course. So there's me paying for that little sin of mine, I suppose. But yeah, there's a scene where Marilyn tries to find like the richest person on the ship, and she goes to the waiter because the waiter there's assigned seating on the cruise ship, and so she goes and she bribes the waiter into letting her sit at the table where um someone with the richest name is sitting, and so there's this person. Let's just say his name is like Michael Kingsley the Third or something. She wants to sit at Michael Kingsley the Third's table, and so she basically, you know, uses her charm on the waiter, and he adds her name to one of the seats there, and so then later that night when she goes to sit there and she's like all looking forward, she's all excited, trying to woo this rich man into giving her, you know, more jewelry and stuff. It's not cheating, but it's just, you know, it's not. It's just you know, it's silly hijinks. It's not really, you're not supposed to look at it that deeply. But yeah, in any case, it's a guy. The guy turns out to be the richest man on the boat or whatever. It's not. It just turns out to be a kid. It turns out to be a kid, and the kid's like all, you know, precocious and mature and sophisticated and everything. He's like, I may be young, but I know how to appreciate a woman or whatever. So yeah, it's there for pure comedy. And then later on, there's a scene where he helps Marilyn get out of a porthole because she snuck into Malone, the private investigator's room, to try to get the cameras, the photos of her and Piggy back, you know, the incriminating photos, the evidence. And there's a whole slapstick scene with her and Piggy comes back, and then, you know, there's this whole misunderstanding, and the kid is underneath a blanket, and he like Piggy thinks that his hands are Marilyn's hands, and it's just, you know, it's the whole thing. But yeah, he was a pretty good character. It was just random. Like I actually I don't usually laugh at stuff like that because it is corny, but this movie it's special. You know, it's kind of it does both very well. It's not only is it a good standard comedy like that, but it also like it, you know, because it has like more going on beneath the surface. Like it's ironic as well. There's an irony. There's a tinge of irony throughout that permeates throughout everything that happens in the movie. So it's, you know, you get a nice dose of both, I would say. But yeah, in terms of the characters, I would agree with you, Simone. Pretty much everyone is a type except Marilyn and Jane. They're pretty interesting. Like I said before, Jane lives by an unconventional personal set of moral standards. For one, her top priority is looking after Marilyn. She clearly has a lot of respect and affection for her. And for another, she doesn't seem to mind indulging her sexual appetite, so to speak. She isn't prudish about anything. She sees what she likes and she takes it, and she doesn't seem to mind the doubts others have for her and her future success on this particular path. She lives in the moment, and the devil may care what comes her way. At the same time, however, she's clever and upright enough to not be crass or overly crude about any of it. She's the female equivalent of, to reiterate this point, of a male bachelor in his early to mid-20s, hitting up bars and clubs downtown and picking up women for one-night stands and casual encounters and maybe more short-term relationships and that sort of thing. As for Marilyn, well, she's pretty much just Marilyn, isn't she? She plays dumb, but she knows someone like her doesn't have to do much in life in order to succeed. She has it made with her good looks and sexual energy, and even though it's all an act, she plays it off so naturally that one gets the feeling that her sexually charged nature is just something that's absorbed within the skin. And I like the flagrancy of her persona, and it's simple but effective. And it's also interesting to note, by the way, that this movie on Wikipedia, it's classified as a sex comedy, and I thought that was funny because it's a sex comedy that doesn't have any sex in it. So I guess it kind of, I think that kind of backs my point that point I made earlier about how, like, Marilyn really does. I mean, she really does do everything but take her clothes off, and you still get you get the same. It achieves the same effect, if not like more so, because it's even more powerful because she doesn't even have to do anything in order to make it happen. She just has to kind of exist. It's really, I understand the appeal. Like I get it. That takes talent. It really does. Is there anything you'd like to add to any of that, Smo? Buddy, old pal, old chap.
Yeah, I think that was labeled as sex comedy because something that happened in this, but I can understand what is labeled as such thing because just like I said, there are some different rules that they put into this different dynamic, different element that I don't know how to describe what is. That's also one main thing that makes this movie interesting.
Yeah. A lot of layers, a lot of like angles and all that sort of thing. So more generally though, Simone, what do you think you got out of watching this? What did you get out of watching Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, would you say?
I don't know. It's pretty tough question, but I think I think it provides me enough information to get into this particular era, to understand the particular era where it was set in, how some of the stories that some childhood story, grandmother that she always told me make sense. I can see the connection, the different media back then, because even though the Philippines is already liberated, or not exactly liberated, but we've been free from the US, I can still see the different adaptation from the culture, how it's still put into the culture. So we can say that the Philippines is called by the Spanish, and it's also been part of the culture. During that time here in the Philippines, it's the American occupation is much more pressure. It is or in connection to that. So even though I don't know, it's set in America, but I can say that kind of gives me more information, not only to the American culture, which incorporated in this one, but also how Filipinos are back then, how they are to adapt into this different that been introduced to them. So that's pretty much how things works here back then. It's just more on trying to adapt on this different change that these people brought here. Kind of different, it seems. just like how the way it is now.
Nice, nice. I think it's. I think. Yeah, I think this is actually the first American movie that we have reviewed on this channel. So there's a little landmark for a little landmark in Imperial Tide's history. But yeah, I guess for me, I think ultimately what I learned is that it is possible to create something that is fun and lighthearted, but that is also capable of delivering some sort of profound message about human nature or existence or whatever it may be. That's really it. I think that's the real core here is that you can enjoy yourself while being all while playing the artist, I suppose, playing at artist. But yeah, Simone, would you watch? Do you think you would watch more like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes in the future? Has this turned you on to musicals like this, or off, and why? Not just musicals, but I guess lighthearted films like this. Like, are you interested in seeing more of this kind of thing in the future?
Yeah, definitely. It throws is the fact that I'm able to on the era itself or where it was set in, the different forms of customs that it incorporated in it. I think that's the point that it is justified that what you call this is the to look for more. Started this just like I said, it's kind of healthy transition. It is some transition of some sort. I watched this film in the state of some sort of transition and whatnot. So pretty interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah. I mean, for me, it's funny, but yeah, like I said before, I already made this point, but the movie feels like the first part of a longer series. Like the first installments in some serial of some sort. And the novel had a sequel, which I mentioned before earlier, and in fact, there was a loose adaptation of that sequel that was released a few years after this, but only with Jane Russell in it. No, not Marilyn. And Jane Russell was playing a completely different character in it, and there was another co-star that wasn't, either of them, or that, yeah. So, in any case, I think Marilyn and Jane, I think they had the potential to make a seriously powerful comedy duo, I guess, powerhouse together. I could see this concept working in the long running television series as well, like I mentioned before. But regardless of particular actresses or personalities, I am more curious about the musical genre than I was before I watched this. I think it might be fun to review at least maybe one more Marilyn movie for now before moving on to other materials for the process, for the podcast. I mean, maybe you agree, Simone? Like, would you be interested in having episode 39 be another iconic Marilyn movie? Is that something you'd sign on for?
Yeah, definitely. Also looking forward for some Audrey Hepburn. I don't know. I don't know. She's interesting. The way I saw Marilyn Monroe portraits. Also, the way I saw Audrey Hepburn of some sort.
Yeah, they're both icons of that particular era. What about Audrey Hepburn do you like, by the way, Simone? What about her appeals to you?
Her looks or her pictures, it's kind of speak the way that Marilyn Monroe portraits. It's kind of it speaks some sort of elegance, some sort of definition of some a different definition beauty of some sort during it kind of speaks what the era is all about.
Sure, sure. Yeah, they embody it. Yeah, they embody the times in which they lived. They really they had the fashion and everything. They had it all going on. They were there for it. They were at the center of it all, so to speak. I don't know. Which do you prefer, Simone? Marilyn or Audrey? Are you a Marilyn guy or an Audrey guy? If you had to pick one.
I don't know, but I watch both of them. But um, for I choose Marilyn because I haven't been introduced to any Audrey Hepburn movies. But if I'm going back to the initial impression, I'm not If I haven't seen this movie, I think I prefer Audrey Hepburn, but we'll see in the future what will happen.
Sure. Well, so then what about I don't know, between Marilyn Monroe and Jane Russell, you know, are you a gentleman, Simone? Do you prefer blondes?
Um, they are both good. I mean, they are both in their own way. So I don't think I prefer blondes, but maybe, maybe that's a good point because I like how naturally how natural the way Marilyn Monroe acts in this one. I think the same way as Jane. They're both good. Um, Maybe I'm more interested in her Marilyn Monroe's character in this one. Much more. I don't know what's the word, but
What, alluring, perhaps? Oh. Sorry, folks, we're having some mild connection issues. Hello?
maybe I'll. Okay, okay. I'm back. I think I'll put it as what do you call this? More interesting
Yeah.
or more entertaining of some sort because of the way she stupid. Um, stupid, but she's not stupid of some sort because she can explain herself very well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's fun to watch. Like you never know what to expect with it. Kind of, it's a very interesting dynamic, and you don't really see it. It's not like that's something they didn't really carry over to modern like media. I don't know. I can't really think of a movie that has something like that in it. Really, I'm sure I could think of something eventually, but I don't know. It's not even if I could, I don't think it was as well done as it was here. But yeah. Let's see. Is there anything else? Oh, yeah. So, Simone, final last question of the night. Has this movie changed the way that you see Marilyn Monroe at all? And if so, why? And how, rather?
Um, the way I saw that has changed the way I saw Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
The question is kind of caught up.
Yeah, has this movie changed the way that you see Marilyn Monroe at all?
I think I will change because it suits or exceeds. It exceeds the way that my initial impression is maybe more of an or quite maybe a 7 or 8 of some sort if I were to rate it the way I saw her, but now it's maybe more than 10, a perfect 10, or it's the perfect 10 score. It's really interesting. I want to know more about her works because it's kind of how she puts things together. She kind of wrap things up and kind of the movie itself. It kind of there are different elements that she put into it that makes it really interesting. I don't know how to put it into words. There are a lot of things that I can put in words because of how good it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I can understand why she made for such a powerful actress. You know, she really was only using about like 1% of what she had in real life on the screen. Like you know, she drew from what she was doing in her personal life for sure. But yeah, I think people like that. I think they do deserve to be legendary. You know, people like that they sort of need to be legendary in a way. You know, they just aren't capable of being anything else. They don't know how to live ordinarily. They don't know how to settle for the average or just you know the middle of the road, the calm and the narrow or whatever you want to call it. They are larger than life, you know, and so they play to their strengths and achieve this sort of unbalanced success. But it's of course it's success nonetheless, and they skyrocket to it. And it feels very gratifying, I think, to be able to experience, you know, even secondhand some of that greatness, and even if only for a moment, a blink of an eye in the passage of time, as they say. But yeah, I mean, she's like James Dean, she's like Elvis Presley, she's like River Phoenix, she's like Marlon Brando, you know, all these people who are like crazy successful, Al Pacino, like all these people who were crazy successful at what they did but somehow kind of either rotted over time or died, ended tragically, and everything. It's like there's a certain type of person, and Marilyn she belonged to that type. It's like they're really in a class of their own. But the good's really good and the bad's really bad. It's very extreme. I don't think I would want to be one of them, but they are admirable and worthy of observation, I suppose, and that's why they are so successful, because people really like looking at them and taking them in and so on and so forth. But yeah, Jane Russell's cool too, by the way. I mean, let's not short shrift her. It's just that, unfortunately, for whatever reason, it's like this was kind of the biggest thing that she ever did as an actress, so she's just not as remembered, I guess, even though she should be. But yeah, I guess that's really it. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Simone, or to the discussion in general? I mean, is there anything you want to get to that we didn't get to, or are we good? Would you say?
I don't know. Maybe again, I brought up the cultural connection thing,
Yeah.
because how people during that time are dressed up here, how they are trying to look like or to fit into the definition of beauty standards in the West by during that time. You can see that connection. And also, I forgot this novel, a Filipino novel. I haven't read it, but I saw the synopsis. I forgot the name. Jessica Hagedorn. I think she wrote a novel. I can see the connection in this. The how the influence of different what do you call this, um colonial powers or colonial empires here in the Philippines, but technically it is more on the aspects of things, um connection, and it's interesting. Maybe I might read it in the paper of some sort. It gives a novel a hope. We'll see.
Cool. Yeah, it's an interesting connection there, isn't it? But yeah. I guess with that being said, we're pretty much done. But as always, I like to kind of sneak in a bit of a bonus question, Simone. And I was just wondering, I don't know, how do you think this episode of the podcast went? I think it was a nice, fresh breath of air after 14 episodes of fucking Berlin Alexander plots. I think this was a success. I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with the result.
It's really good. I think that gotta bring up or start a different pace for the channel. Not only for the channel but also for us. It kind of helps us appreciate kind of works this setup, to look at things far more different, very different from what Berlin Alexander practice, and also how we are going to approach this review. It's good, but I don't know. I feel like at first, during the opening of this conversation, it's not very good. I think I need um how you explain how you see the movie, or the explanation. It really helped me to articulate my thoughts, and is I'm able to um make the sense out of it, I guess. I don't know.
Well, that's good. At least someone got something out of it, I suppose. Right? Yeah, but yeah, I would say I think what we learned from this particular episode of the Imperial Tides podcast is, for one, you're just not you're not going to get your money's worth for that microphone you bought. You might as well just throw it away. It does so much more damage than it does good. I mean, it really is like the worst thing in the world. And it's not your fault. It's the microphone's fault. But I would say, if I were you, I would never use it again. At least not on the podcast. Maybe it works if you're just by yourself. But no, there's like too much rustling, and it's just it doesn't help. Also, I can tell that your internet connection is pretty busy over there or something. It kind of cut in and out. But technical difficulties notwithstanding, I think we pulled through pretty well. If I do say so myself, and I do. Yeah, what else was I gonna say? I don't know. Maybe just in terms of, well, for me, I guess things I could work on. I don't know. I got to try to like reword the way I write my scripts, because I write them in like this very kind of a high-minded way or something. and it's not really. It's not always the easiest thing to like translate into the spoken word as opposed to the written. So maybe I need to put more effort into acting it out a little bit more. Maybe I don't know. I'm not a very good actor. I'm not a very good liar either. Even though I do tend to lie a lot. Not like big lies, just short, little, small, little white lies. But anyway, yeah, I probably need to work on intonation a little more, inflection, that sort of thing, projecting. Maybe I don't know. Ultimately, just I don't know. Just I need to probably retool the way that I put these together. But yeah, we'll figure it out. The more practice we do, the more we'll settle into the way we go about things. My methods could use a little work. That's all I gotta say, really. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the end of the Imperial Tides. This installment of the Imperial Tides podcast, episode 38. If you enjoyed, please consider liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, engaging with us in all the various ways in which you can. Hopefully we'll be reviewing another Marilyn movie. We're probably going to do two. There are a bunch to do, but I don't want to like start a whole other thing because that's a trend that I've noticed with this channel or with the podcast anyway. Is that I always I get overly ambitious and I try to do like some massive undertaking, some massive project, like, oh, let's review every single Shakespeare play that's ever been done before. Oh, let's do every single episode of a fucking one show. Let's do this, let's do that, and it's like I think we always end up getting exhausted by it. So to mix it up a little bit, we'll only do 2 Marilyn movies, and then once we hit episode 40, I mean, we'll do like a grab bag of like all sorts of different things, mostly literary adaptations, because again, that's kind of the general thrust of the show. But all of that notwithstanding, I hope you guys enjoyed, and stay tuned, and bye for now, and peace.